What up, everybody? It's your girl July from Kickback Couture, and today I will be talking about actually going through the process of how to do an in-depth mix session. So this video will teach you how to make your mixes sound huge. Up until this point, I haven't done a video that's going to be this in-depth. So here's a little preview of what you're going to get out of this video. This is the mix before. This is after. Alright, so the first thing we want to do from the ground up, this is our completed beat. There is no processing done whatsoever besides like effects to some of the instruments. So when I say effects, I mean effectrics or halftime, things like that. But there's no mixing done in any case to this beat. No leveling, no filtering, EQing, anything. So the first thing we want to do is make sure everything is organized. So we see this is pretty organized. The arrangement isn't completely fleshed out, but as a producer, we know that arrangements, which is how the beat is laid out from intro, verse, hook, bridge, and so on, the arrangement can always change in time. So this is the basic framework of the beat, and it is complete, just isn't arranged. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that it is organized. So in this case, everything looks to be in order here. I got my drums up at the top, my 808s in the middle. My drums are all the same color, they're gray. My tag is here in the middle. I'm gonna move this up to the top. Then I have all of my instruments. I have lead 1, lead 2, lead 3, piano, bell. So at the bottom, I have my automation effects. This one is a tape stop, so I'll leave that. And these are just some lighting fixtures that I have saved into my beat making template. But as for now, we are mixing. So we want to make sure that our mixer is also organized. So looking at my sequencer window, it doesn't exactly mirror what's going on up in the mixer. So I want to click down here, hold down Command A, and then right click, and I want to sort selected device groups. And this will mirror whatever we have going on down here, up here. And I'm going to then change the color of this 808 channel to match the other one, which is here, 808, 808. And I'm actually going to choose a color that is easier to see. So we'll go with turquoise in this case. Now we see I have all of these tracks named right here. Just for organization purposes, I'm going to also name this add labels to clips hi-hat 2. And you can even do something as simple as HH2 for speed. Alright, now everything is nice and arranged and organized. I will not be going into the rack window much. I will only be using the mixer and the sequencer. So to flip between the mixer and the sequencer is F7 and the mixer is F5. So we are going to be flipping back between those a lot. F7, F5. Alright, now the first thing I start with in my mixes is my low end. So that's going to be kick and bass, and then followed by the remainder of my drums. So let's start off with the kick. I also want to mention that many times when you're mixing, you want to have a reference track. So if you want to learn how to set up a reference track, definitely check out my video on how to set that up. I'll throw the link up above so you can watch that video and set up a reference track in case you want to mix in a certain style or make your mix sound like a particular beat or song that you like. So starting off with my kick, I'm going to flip back to the sequencer and I'm going to loop a section that has my kick playing. So my kick is up here at the top. So what I'm going to do is loop this section. So set loop to selection. I'm going to make sure this loop button right here is also on so that it loops back automatically without me having to restart it or click the timeline to reposition it over and over again. Alright, so let's start with the kick. So I don't necessarily have a set level as to where I want my kick to hit. There's no hard rule for that, but I do make sure I have a good amount of headroom available for the rest of my sounds. So my kick is not clipping right off the bat. So we see this meter here, and we can also view this meter in the rack by pressing F6. It's in the mastering section up here, big meter. So you might have all of these or you might have a few. Whatever you have, click on big meter and you'll be able to see this meter. And just make sure you're not clipping. If it's clipping, it'll be red here and it'll also be red here in this output meter. So let's go ahead and change this mode to we'll go with VU for now. And we'll just make sure that the kick isn't hitting for above 0 decibels just to give you a good reference. Alright, so if it was clipping, it would look like this. It would turn red. So just to reset it, you're just going to hit this reset button right here. And you'll no longer see red lines anywhere. So since we're so close to clipping, if we turn this kick up just a little bit, we'll see red in this VU meter. It doesn't necessarily mean much in this digital realm, give or take. It's very arguable, but just for safekeeping, make sure that you leave headroom. So let's turn this down a bit. And we see this yellow light here on the peak meter telling us where our kick is peaking. Now, I am partially blind and I cannot see that number. And because I cannot see that number, I do have prescription glasses, which I'm not wearing right now. I have no idea where they are. Because I can't see that number, and I know a lot of you also cannot see that number, we're not really going to be too particular about it. I do, however, know that from the looks of it, this is a 12 and this is an 8. So this is hitting at about, let's say, -10 decibels. So that's where we're going to let our kick hit. -10 decibels, and that's enough headroom. Alright. Okay, so I now have my kick set to a good level. It's hitting at negative 10 decibels, which is fine. You can go lower if you'd like to, or you could mix a bit higher. It is completely up to you. So let's move on to the first 808. And the first one that plays is 808-2. You can name it in the correct order if you have multiple 808s, but as long as I know where it is, it doesn't matter too much. So I have this section selected. I set loop and start playback. I accidentally turned on click at some point. So I'm just going to make sure this 808 is not louder than my kick. Now, I'm listening to it in context of the kick. We want to make sure we also listen to it by itself. But first, let's level it in relation to the kick. And we can move it over to view them next to each other. Alright, cool. I got it at a good level. Let's listen to this 808 and see what it sounds like by itself. This 808 has a hard punch transient. The transient is the beginning of the 808, so that will be competing with the punch of the kick. So in order to get rid of that, we're going to want to sidechain the kick and 808. But we do see that we have two separate 808s. So we also want to sidechain the second 808. But let's hear what that one sounds like and mix that one before we do any sidechaining. Let's mix it level-wise first. Now, an important part of this process, if you have two 808s, is to make sure that they are relatively the same level. You don't want the song section to switch and one 808 be 50 times louder than the first one, or even 2 times louder, unless that is your purpose dynamic wise. But usually if you're using multiple 808s in a beat like this, they're going to be the same level. So let's listen to it and see how different it is. So this one is louder than this one. Alright, no worries there. A quick fix to that would also be a process, would also involve a process that is going to lead us into the sidechaining. So we're going to select both of these 808 channels. We're going to click on this one, hold down shift, and we're going to right click, and we held down shift to select both of them. We're going to right click, and we're going to route to new output bus. I'm going to call this bus BB for bass bus. Alright. Now, in this mix channel, what we're going to do to tame the dynamics and the different levels of each bass is, well, we could in a sense add a compressor, but we don't want to add a compressor at this point. So we're going to use our best judgment and make sure that these are leveled. So we can watch this meter also to see the sudden change. Gonna bring this down. And that's a lot closer. Alright, we're golden. So those are both relatively similar in level. and the sections don't differ too much as far as the low end goes. So what's important to mention is that for each channel there are 3 Fs. I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but it's fix, fit, and feature. And I learned this from, I believe his name is Alex Case. So fix, fit, and feature. So we want to fix each sound, which is, you know, what we're doing now, leveling, whatnot, making sure actually the fixed portion is more like EQing and whatnot. But we're going to level first. Fix, fit, and feature. But we have to make sure we do that to every sound. So we'll go more in depth with those after we do the side chaining. I don't want to talk your ears off. Let's go through more demonstration. So in order to side chain this bass bus to the kick so that the kick punches through both 808s, we're going to navigate in the rack to this bass bus here. So clicking on it, rack, and we've navigated to the bass bus. Gonna hit tab to flip to the back of the rack. Here in the dynamic section, I'm going to right click under here on one of these inputs. And if you cannot see this for some reason, we can hit K to reduce cable clutter, or it fades them, makes them, what's the word? Gives it less opacity, more of a Photoshop term, but whatever. And you right click and you go up to kick mix channel, wherever your kick is called, whatever it's called, parallel output left, right. That routes this up to the mix channel where my kick is located. And now up in the mixer section, we see my 808 in the dynamic section has this key button lit up. So we're going to turn this sidechain compressor on and make sure we have a section with the first 808 or the 808-2 playing. Now we hear the 808 dipping in volume every time the kick hits, but that is a bit too drastic. So here I'm going to make sure the release is really fast and the threshold can be so if it's all the way to the right, you won't hear any sidechain compression. So the threshold can be wherever your sounds are located meter wise. It can be anywhere. So you just have to use your ears. And you can also watch the meter until your ears are accustomed to the changes. So we're going for about 1 or 2 lights if you're still using your eyes to gauge. And we don't necessarily have to change the ratio. If you want to, you can. But in this case, I'm going to leave it where it's at. And listening to it, we can hear the 808 dipping. So it's allowing the 808 to come through. So that's what sidechain compression is. It dips the volume of the 808s, the 808 in this case, and it's allowing the kick to punch through for that moment in time, which is that transient. Alright, let's move on to the next sound. Following my kicks, I mix my snare. Or snares. Now this snare is loud. So right off the bat, if it's not my kick or 808, I'm going to pull up an EQ. And this is the fixed portion. We don't need any of this low end here. It's occupying space that our kick and bass are taking. And you won't even notice it's gone in context. unless you have really good ears. Gonna cut it off at about 200 hertz. The fundamental frequency is about here. We also have one here, but it's mainly here, but we don't need that right here. Get rid of that. Alright, let's level it. Alright, let's move on to the next sound. Snare 2. Tons of low end right here in the 40 hertz area. We don't need any of that. Gonna cut that out. Now let's level it. Let's go ahead and move our loop points so that we can hear this part more clearly and more steady. Gonna collapse the dynamics menu. Alright, cool. Let's move on to the next drum, which is a clap. So the clap is located in this section. Gonna set loop to selection and start playback. Pulling up the filter, cutting out that low end. Now we're leveling. I'm actually not gonna touch it. Gonna leave it where it's at. So, just listening, and I'm fine with that. So, next sound, hi-hat. I believe this hi-hat is too loud, so I'm gonna turn this down. We don't need to filter anything out. There's no information here. Open hat. No low information here. As a rule of thumb, I like to make sure my open hi-hat is the same volume as my regular hi-hat. Or open hat, sorry. Sounds about good. Now there is no perk 1 or 2. So we could essentially delete this channel. Delete selected only. And there's nothing on here. But we're going to keep that there because it's holding all of these drums together just because I'm using a specific drum instrument. This is hi-hat 2. So this one's a lot lower than the first hi-hat. But there's no low information here either. We don't have to worry about that. But we do want to turn it down. And that's about a good spot right there. And there's no effects on this either. We now have all of the low-end bass drums mixed. So up until this point, you may have noticed I have not done any panning or any automation for that matter. No width changes, anything like that. It is automatically assumed in hip-hop mostly that all drums are mono. So we did not do any panning to the drums. However, you can automate things, and if you would like to automate something that is fairly simple, I will go ahead and show you a instance in which you would automate your drums in panning. So with the hi-hat, this is a creative effect. We're going to go to the rack by clicking the rack button on the hi-hat mix channel. And we're going to create an instance of Pancake by Cable Guys. This is a free effect. And what this is going to do is pan it, the hi-hat, from left to right based on the time that we set it to. So let's listen to it. It's in the right channel. It's in the left channel. Now I want this to move a bit faster. So let's change this to a bar. Alright, let's try. Let's try it like that. And then let's speed it up a little bit. I like that effect. Now with it panning, we want to make sure the level's still good. And a good rule of thumb for this is to check your mix in mono. And because it was mono previously, it sounded good at that level. So we can therefore leave it there. If you want to be able to check your mix in mono periodically, you can easily set that up, which I will do right now. In my master section, which is on bypass and there are no effects, gonna deselect bypass if it is selected. Right click inside of the master channel, go to effects, up to reason devices, go down to M-Class Stereo Imager. I'm going to turn this knob, this low band knob, down to mono, and I'm going to change the crossover frequency to a number in between 300 and 400 hertz, closer to 300. And now my low end will be mono. If I want my entire beat mono, then I will simply turn both of these mono. Now I did go over how to set up a mono mix, but I will again go over it in this video since this is really in depth. So we are going to make it so that hitting this button here will trigger this. Now I previously had this set up and then deleted it so that I could show you again. So in the master section, we're going to click on, make sure the show programmer button is selected. Click on M Stereo 1 or whatever you named it. For button 1, we're going to select enabled. This will turn it on and off. Actually, let's not select enabled. Let's hit low width. And then for under here, under button 1, we're also going to change this to high width. This is going to make this a lot easier. Now, when we press this button, we'll see the buttons go back and forth. So when it's not lit up, we see that it's mono, but we want to make it so that when it is lit up, it is mono. So we're going to reverse these numbers, and we're going to change the crossover frequency again, like I said, to about 340. We want to keep the low frequency in our beat mono for a multitude of reasons, which I will not get into right now. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to reverse these numbers, and then I will explain why. So we reverse these numbers so that when the button is off, it's not mono. When it's on, it is mono. Now the problem with this is that when we turn it off, it's completely wide. We don't want that. So we're going to put this at original for the max, or actually for the minimum. So for the original, we're going to put it at 0. So bring this down to 0. Test it. And now this is at 0. And now this is at 0. But if you remember, I said that the low end is going to be mono the entire time. So we're actually just going to keep this mono at -63. Alright. So when this button lights up, everything is mono. Alright, so now by clicking this button here, or up here in the master section, which is master inserts, up here, we can turn on and off the mono effect. Well, utility more so. Alright, now everything is mono and nothing is panning, and we can hear everything clearly. This is how we check and make sure everything is audible. Now the reason we check our mix in mono is because not everybody has a stereo system. Some people have Bluetooth speakers with one main speaker, and they can't hear the difference between left and right. So we want to make sure everything is audible mono. So often cross-reference and check between mono and stereo. So mono, stereo, mono, stereo. And if we want to hear that by itself, we'll solo the hi-hat and we'll listen to this. This is stereo. And we also see the meter changing from left to right. This is mono. Alright. Now let's continue our mix. We're going to start with the first instrument sound. First instrument sound is lead 1, and we see we have 3 different leads, but let's start with the first one. Solo it. I'm going to collapse these menus. Whoa. Collapse. Alright, cool. Now let's listen. Make sure this lead is playing in this section. It is. We have lead 1 and 2 playing in this section. Way too loud. First thing I'm going to do is pull up a filter. Cut out the low end. We don't want to cut too drastically or we'll take away from the character of the sound like this. Now we'll level. Keep in mind we have more than one lead. I'm going to keep this up so we can cross-reference mono as we go on. Let's mix in the second lead. There's no low end information here, but I'll add a high pass filter just to be safe. Now let's level it. Now up until this point, I haven't done any panning, so let's go ahead and start to pan. Since these are both playing in the same section, I'm gonna pan this left about 16%, and I'm gonna pan this right 16%. And let's make sure these levels are pretty equal. Gonna turn this up a bit. And again, we can check this mono and make sure we can still hear everything. Back to stereo. Now let's see what the next sound is concurrently in this section. It is the piano. And if I didn't mention this before, I'm not sure if I did, we want to make sure we mix an area with the most sounds. Mostly low end sounds included in one area. So the piano is the next sound in this section. Gonna remove this low end. Now we're gonna level it. Oops. Keep accidentally clicking on the wrong areas. That's a good level. Alright, the next sound in this area is the bell. Alright. And I want to keep that piano up the middle because it has nothing to contrast it. So I'm just going to leave that up the middle as personal preference also. Not much going on with this bell, but to be safe. Now we're gonna level it. Now I want to do some creative effects with this. So we fixed it. There was nothing much to fix with level or EQ. We fit it in, which was the leveling portion, and then the feature is to like make it creative, make it stand out. So let's go ahead and navigate to this in the rack by clicking the rack button here. This is our bell. And let's also pan this using Pancake from left to right. So Pancake cable, guys. Pancake 2. And let's listen to it. And for every bell sound, for every trigger of the sound, I want it to go from left and right for the next trigger. And we can select this by itself. Still sounds mono, so maybe we need to slow it down. There we go. Great. Again, since we have changed the stereo imaging, the panning, from left to right, it's no longer straight down the middle. We want to make sure that we check it in mono. So we're going to open the, which one has it? The insert button right here will get you to these buttons. So we're going to click this and check the mix in mono. Still sounds like it's panning from left to right to me. Let me double check this. It's off. Ha. That makes sense as to why the hi-hat still sounded weird. I thought I was going crazy. Alright, let's check it. Now it's mono. Now it's stereo. Mono. Stereo. Now just to backtrack, let's listen to this hi-hat again since I originally messed up. Alright, so this hi-hat is stereo right now. Let's hear it. Now it's mono. Now it's stereo. Cool. Alright, it looks like the last couple, or the last sound in our beat is lead 3. So let's move on to lead 3. Lead 3 is located in the next section, but we will mix it in the context with the section with the most sounds, so here. Gonna filter it. Gonna level it. Now, up until this point, I have focused on the fix and the fit, and we've also touched on feature. And within those concepts, we EQ'd the low end to let the drums through the kick and bass. We leveled and we've done some minimal panning and some creative panning as well. So now I want to teach you how to use send effects. We're going to drop down the send button right here, and also over here on the right side we see effects send. Gonna drop this down. Now it can look a bit intimidating, this mix channel, because it's not completely congruent. We see this EQ is in the same area as effects send, so if we don't have everything open at once, it'll look a bit wonky. So we want to make sure that we're creating the send in the right place. This is the effects send section. We're gonna right click, create send effect. Let's go with something that I know you all have if you have Reason. If you don't have Reason, you can use whatever stock reverb your DAW has. MK2 reverb. The stock reverbs are located under factory sounds, all effect patches, reverb, and we're gonna pick a simple room reverb. So let's go with stereo room. And you can double click to load it, or you can drag it in like I just did. Gonna close the browser. And now we have reverb on this channel. This channel here, which is congruent to the first button in this send section. So if we have everything open, it will still not be completely congruent, which is confusing, but just remember what I said. So let's backtrack a bit, start with this lead sound and add some reverb and change the leveling if we need to. This is really drastic reverb. So I'm definitely going to want to turn it down after that. Next sound in this section is lead 3. And if we remember, in the previous section, lead 1 and lead 2 are playing at the same time. So let's go back to that area. Make sure these levels are still the same with reverb. And they appear to be fairly similar. So, gonna turn it down a tad bit. So we do notice that this lead is by itself. Lead 1 is by itself. It's no longer paired with the first lead. So what we're gonna do later on is automate the panning of this to be mono in this section right here, since it is by itself. Of course, the reverb will still have a stereo effect, but the lead will no longer be panned. So let's go ahead and do that now while the beat isn't arranged. So we're going to right click on this pan button, this pan knob, edit automation. We're going to draw a clip in the area right here. And we're going to make sure our point is at 0 when we hit the 41 mark. Now if we solo only this sound, we will hear it go, whoops, this sound. I accidentally changed the wrong lead. So I'm going to right click on the lead to automate it. Lead 1. Gonna draw a clip with the pen tool. Gonna make sure that inside this box it's at 0 when we hit 41, which is the point where it is playing by itself and it's not paired with lead 2. And we're gonna make sure the value is at 0 so that the mix is balanced. So let's listen to this and hear the difference in this lead by itself from when it's panned to the left and when it is straight mono. This is to the left. This is mono. Not too much of a big difference since there is reverb, but we just want to make sure that everything is still fairly balanced. So now we're going to get onto the reverb with the piano and the bell. We can add a different kind of reverb if we want, or we could leave it completely dry. Let's move on to a section that has the bell playing. I think the piano is at a good level. After we've added our reverb to our select instruments, whatever we chose, we want to check the mix in mono. Before I check the mix in mono, I will say that it's okay to add reverb to drums. Typically, you add reverb to the hi-hat, the snare, clap. Open hi-hat can have a bit of reverb. You never put reverb on a kick drum or an 808, ever. The only time you put reverb on anything like that is if it's an overhead mic, and usually overhead mics don't include bass. It's usually just the drums. So with the drum set, if you have an overhead mic and you want to add reverb to make it sound more uniform and make it fit together, you can do that. But you don't put reverb on an 808 ever. You don't put reverb on a kick ever. Okay? So let's add a little bit of reverb to my hi-hat, and that is all I want to do as far as the drum goes. I'm gonna leave it just like that. Alright, so you would think we're done with the mix, which we ultimately pretty much are. We have everything mixed in together. We fixed it with the EQ. We fitted in with the level, also the EQ, and we featured some things, some creative. Everything is pretty much good with that. So we talked about the panning and whatnot, and everything is mixed in, right? We added some reverb. If you listen to your mix and you still want to change things, you can. Now with this second 808, I want to add some saturation. So let's do another send effect. So we're going to come over to effect send, and we can actually create this here also. But let's actually not, that doesn't make sense. We're going to create it up in the effects send. So create send effect. Let's find the soft tube saturation knob, which is free. I'm just gonna type it in. Soft tube saturation knob. Create. Gonna put it on keep low. Turn it up a bit and turn on the saturation send for the second 808. And loop it to an area where it's playing. Let's alter it a bit, turn it up. Put it on keep high. So this is the 808 without distortion. And this is it with distortion. And we hear a slight artifact in there from the side chaining happening. We're gonna make sure that the level is good compared to the other 808 still. So we're probably gonna have to turn it down because saturation makes things louder. So let's double check that. Let's turn it down. Sounds closer. If we want to look, we can check in the meter. Pretty good. Alright. So our mix is complete. Now another important part of mixing is listening to it all the way through. We want to cross-reference, check in our monitors, everything like that. So in essence, in order to make our mix sound huge, we want to utilize a stereo field, which is width. We want to utilize leveling, which is height. And we want to utilize reverb, which is depth. So let's start this from the beginning. I believe I do also have my tag to mix in. Make sure my tag is at a good level.
To not fuck it up.
turn it down a bit. I apologize for the language in my tag if it is offensive. Alright, cool. Now I do notice that I have this effect down here, and one of the sounds like it is not tape stopping. Which may be the reverb. It's a nice effect though, so I'll leave it. Alright, beats mixed. For this next portion of the mix, we will be in the master section. So I like to create a uniform sound for my beats, so I usually add some type of saturation on my master channel or a tape sound of some sort, tape emulation. So many times I use Audiomatic. My favorite one is FabFilter Saturn, but if you do not have that and you'd like to use something more cost effective, you can use Audiomatic. In this case, I am going to use Saturn. Now I like to keep it on warm tape. You can change it to anything. Sometimes I use clean tube, warm tube, whatever. I definitely use different settings in it from time to time. Gonna make sure I'm playing an area where the kick is, which is here. Alright, now I'm gonna add a limiter. FabFilter limiter. If you do not have a FabFilter limiter, you can use the maximizer, the M-Class maximizer. In this case, I will show you using the M-Class maximizer. Gonna turn on the soft clip button right here. Make sure this is lit up. Want a fast attack and release. And gonna turn up the amount just a bit. Now we don't want to turn this up too much because we will crush the dynamics in our beat. So you can turn it up drastically. And you'll hear what I'm talking about. Gonna keep this fairly low. Gonna turn up the input gain. We want to make sure we're getting a signal here. Don't want to compress too much. And I use this to check and see how loud my beat is. So I want to make sure I'm hitting about -12 to -15. It depends on where you're trying to place your beat. If it's for an artist, I set my ceiling to -3 decibels LUFS. If you want to know more about metering, you can check out the videos I have on mastering. I will throw those up above in the cards. Alright, once your mix is done, you want to make sure to cross-reference in different monitors and also go back and forth between mono and make sure that everything sounds good. So you can use something like Mix Checker, which looks like this, and simulate what your mix will sound like in different environments. including car, MP3, a park, wherever the case may be, whatever button you click on for that matter. So let's check this in mono. We can hear everything clearly. Now it's stereo, so we are good. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe, most definitely let me know what you would like to see next. It's all culture, kickback, and cook up.